let's just talk about that with the arts community. If we just expose ourselves and make ourselves vulnerable, we actually might build empathy for what we do. And that actually might drive funding.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Angela. Thanks
How
for
are
having
you?
me today. I'm good.
Hi.
I'm very good.
So, as usual, I just dive right into the conversation. What is one of the biggest misconceptions that you face as an architect as it pertains to the importance of creativity, creative thinking, or even your profession?
I think that people often put us in a box as creatives, and they think of us as somewhat one dimensional, and they think that we only use the creative side of our brain. And the reality is, I think that a lot of creatives are informed by logic and rational thinking, and they don't trust our judgment or our viewpoint on that side. They look at us as like, well, you're the creative people. I'm going to get the banker over here to figure this out, or I'm going to get somebody who has knowledge in those specialty areas to help supplement what you do. And the reality is, I think as creatives, we're the people who are imaginative about the other side of the brain. And I think that people will just put us in a box. I always feel like we're kind of like running uphill to try to prove that what we're suggesting is accurate. And at the end of the day, uh, the other people often catch up with us, but it takes some time.
Well,
So
it's interesting to hear you describe that because when I think of one dimensional thinking, I think of a banker. So for me, it's the creative notion or what you bring is multidimensional because you see things multidimensionally,
yeah,
correct?
yeah, I think that we are able to connect disparate issues. So we're able to expand the conversation and have a broader discussion. So we don't just think about it in terms of the established rules or protocols that are in place or conventions. We look at it from a standpoint of what could be, what's the potential here, and that kind of creative thinking um, is not good if you're interested in expediency. It's not good if you're interested in repetition and efficiency, which actually our society has unfortunately prioritized. So I often, I teach as well as being an architect, and I'll have students who really take pride in how detailed they are. And they like say, oh, I'm just really detailed. And I think, why are you so proud of that? Precision is what you build to. I would be really proud of me having the ability to think broadly, or I'd be really proud of someone who can introduce new concepts. That's true innovation when you can actually bring new discussion to the table. And I think the way we do it is we connect to a broader context. I once had a professor who taught me this lesson, and I've never forgotten it. Every time you have a problem that you need to solve, you need to step out. So if you're looking at and trying to design a setting for a table, you need to think about the table. If you're trying to design the table, you need to think about the room. If you're designing the room, you need to think about the building. If you're designing the building, you need to think about the neighborhood. If you're thinking about the neighborhood, you need to think about the city, blah, 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 right? And so as creatives, we're always looking at things in relationship to a broader context.
So I have, as always, when I talk with you, my mind is pinging everywhere. So one thing that I say is we live in stagnation as creatives or the creative sector, meaning we're on, and now I'm primarily talking about funding, investment, understanding, support. I also say that the arts need to come out of the closet. When you talk about we're put in a box. How much do you think we put ourselves in a box? Maybe we're put in the box because we put ourselves in that box. You're nodding so clearly you understand
Yep,
where I'm
I
trying to go with
completely
this.
agree. Yes, that's the total issue. Um, so let's back up and say, why did we end up pursuing a career in something this creative? So we all are introduced to many different things in our lives. We have math. We all take math. We all take English. We all take history. We all take science. And when we select the creative process, for some reason, we tend to sharpen our skills related to artistic endeavors. So that would be, thinking, like I just said, thinking broadly, beginning to think of new things, evaluating and researching what's happened in the past in the creative sector. We actually do not practice our skills relationship related to analysis and proof. And the other thing is, we're taught to believe in individual genius. So as a creative, we really appreciate those people who are the individual genius, right? So the Einstein, the artist, the Picasso, the Frank Gehry, the people who are actually bringing their own unique talent to the table and moving the dime. So if we believe in individual genius, we don't realize we have to prove our recommendations to people.
Explain that.
So we live in a society. So if we want to be valued, we have to explain what we do to other people because they don't understand. So what we do is we create things and we present them as art, as music, as architecture. And we expect everybody to just accept it because we are the creatives. But the reality is we actually have some work to do to help people understand why what we're suggesting is worthy. And if you are really talented, you're brought in through a culture in your training that you don't feel like you need to justify things, right?
Yeah. So tell me then, when I think about the arts need to come out of the closet, I spend all day long talking, thinking, believing in advocacy, but I find that a lot of times our sector creatives talk to creatives about they don't understand, nobody understands, meaning how can we better cross collaborate with other industries or punch out of the box so we are having conversations with other business leaders? A thought has come to mind quickly that I'll explain, and then I want your response. Speaking with a woman about a month ago who owns a performing arts company in Atlanta, and it's a for-profit, but she runs it. Her mission isn't that all of her students are going to end up on Broadway. Her mission is that they're learning valuable, transferable skills that one day will make them well-rounded human beings that they can contribute in any field that they go into. But she goes to her local business chamber luncheon and they go around the table and say, what do you do? And she brings up this performing arts business. And it's this, invisible kind of pat on the head, like, well, isn't that nice? And then these other business leaders proceed to talk about how their employees lack communication skills and they lack collaborative skills and they lack being creative. I want to define a new vocabulary to which we can better communicate. That is our foundation, are all of those skills that are lacking in other industries.
Yeah. So when we propose on a project, I've been working really hard to communicate with more detail exactly what we're going to do, because we presume that it's not important to them how we get to the end, but just that we're going to design a building for them and we're not going to need to explain to them all of the things that we do. And if you don't explain the complexity of what you're doing to people, they will not value it. But if you actually help them understand the complexity that is required in order to be creative and come up with creative solutions, I think that people will have more empathy. Additionally, I think we do this to ourselves because the other side of the coin here is that we lack empathy for their opinion.
Ah, yeah.
So because we find creative solutions to be so valuable and we really respect the recommendations of other creatives, we tend to dismiss the people in finance or scheduling or business leadership that is more analytically based as uninformed problems. And I actually have had my life checked in this way because I married one of them, right? So she's this person that's really analytical, and I often have to. I often say to people, "I can't believe that I've been married to you for 36 years, and I still have to prove things to you more than I do my clients." But it's because of who she is, and she feels safe and comfortable telling me that I need to prove these things. So I think a lot of clients, a lot of people we interact with who provide, let's say, funding for the arts, they don't understand the complexities of why it costs so much. But if you go in and you actually try, if they're trying to fund a project for science, I can guarantee you this is science proposal is 300 pages long, and it's so overwhelming that they don't understand it. We just do a 2-paragraph thing saying, we're going to create a piece of art. Would you like to fund it? We don't talk about the impact on people. We don't talk about the complexity of how much things cost, why you need to do things in certain ways, and we don't justify it. So I think part of it is because we don't want to live in that space. We find that to be mundane. We don't really have respect for a lot of those things, and we don't feel we have to explain it to people. But what I think is that society is in such a disarray and needs us so much. Like you're talking about the colleagues at the business luncheon. I was a Rotarian for years, and I could not get over how much they valued my opinion because I was one of the only ones that was bringing problem-solving skills to the table. A lot of people just do not have problem-solving skills. They're implementers, or they are people who analyze. They don't connect everything together. They don't bring problem-solving skills to the table. And as creatives, I think we're the people who are doing that, right? So think about an artist who's doing a painting. So you have an issue with trying to improve the texture of the paint on the canvas. You're going to experiment in many different ways, and you're going to find creative solutions to get the texture that you feel is important. And you're going to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail until you have success. And we're very accustomed to that process. Others are not. So when we explain our process to bring people along, we need to help them understand we're going to go through failure. We're going to fail many times. This is a process of prototyping, and we're going to model things. And the reason we do this is we want to test it all so that we can reduce the cost implications for change during construction or whatever.
So in leading a renaissance of relevance, I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying, and you mentioned that you've taught or you teach in higher ed. We're seeing more and more these humanities, arts and humanities classes being reduced. And you're talking about problem solving, which I agree 100%. And I believe that that artists, creatives are the ultimate entrepreneurs. Like that's where that comes from. And I too teach and I teach at a school where it's an arts management, arts entrepreneurship program. And the only way that they're allowed to use the word entrepreneur is if they have the word art in front of it, because the business school says that they own the word entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I know. Okay. So where's the tipping point? If we know this, and if we continually see industry leaders, non-creative sector industry leaders saying we need more innovation at the table, we need more creative solutions. Here's another quick fact. Local fine arts college says that one of the top leading banks in the country, they hire art students because they know that for every 3 engineers they have in the room that's developing some product for the consumer, they need a creative at the table to help them figure out how they get it from conception to consumer.
Yes, totally.
Where are we missing the point? Is everything just the bottom line? Because you also talk about complexity, and every time I hear you
about
say
complexity,
I think expensive.
Yeah.
But if we don't face that, we end up spending more money fixing problems because all we were concerned about was a short-term, low-cost, high return on my investment at Do you know what I'm saying? There's all
Yeah.
of that.
So I think we tend to think in terms of polar extremes. So what we really need here is we need diverse viewpoints to come to the table, and we need those diverse viewpoints to have mutual respect and contribute in a way that's not the Ford process line. That's much more about planning and establishing, understanding criteria, all the parameters, the implications of decisions, and all of that kind of collaboration up front will actually help save money. So let's look at the history of the 20th century. We actually exploited issues of control. So the assembly line was about control, right? So how can you be efficient? How do you teach somebody to just do this all day and perfect that so we can be expedient? And we're going to have a creative process over here for the design of a car. And then that car is going to be produced by a completely different set of people. The cars that are really valuable are the ones where there's a collaborative process, where design and making are done at the same time. They become timeless, right? So when you look at the valuation on that process that's more collaborative with the viewpoints coming together, you end up with a higher quality product that lasts for a longer period of time. It becomes a classic. The same thing is true when you're doing a painting, or the same thing's true when you're doing and designing a building. So if we look at everything in an extreme way, like it's this or that, we're going to have a problem. So I think what we can do is just sort of take steps to help build awareness about the complexity. We don't have to go in and like make it overwhelming or scare people or make people believe it's going to be super costly, like you suggest, that the perception would be that it's super costly. In fact, I would say, as an aside, one of the things I struggled with as an architect for years is people would see our portfolio and be like, well, we can't afford you. We can't afford that. Why? Well, it's just too expensive. Like, my firm did the Knowlton School of Architecture at Ohio State, which is this really great, iconic form on the campus. And of course, we did it 20 years ago, but we did it for $165 a square foot, which is most of the institutional buildings at that time were being done for $250. So why is it less expensive? We made choices to not add materials in certain ways. We did creative ways to structure it in a way that you needed to be able to use fewer materials, etc. So you can save cost through that kind of collaborative thinking. I think that because we have this mindset from the 20th century of productivity and speed, we feel that we have to be expedient. The reality is, I think what we should be doing is tackling fewer problems, but in a much deeper way. Because right now we're trying to do all of these problems and there's no focus, and we're getting about this much of all of them solved, and it's just becoming worse, right? So we have problems with housing. We have problems with accessibility in terms of affordability. We have problems with, educational systems that feel like they're not appropriate anymore. So you can't attack all these issues at the same time. But if we were to creatively bring the people together that were important, I'm very interested in patronage for the arts. When I was in Chicago, I went and got a second graduate degree in history of architecture and art. And my thesis was about patronage in European culture through time, and how, the Roman Catholic Church funded the exploration of new cathedrals that really had an impact on the time. And then during Mussolini's term, he had Tirani, who was this modernist who created a new architecture for Italy. But anyway, I think that a lot of times we don't understand the value that patrons have on the creative process. And we can't just take their money and ignore them. We actually have to hear them, and we have to help them understand. And there's a leadership process that needs to be done. And like I said, if we go back to this issue of us as the creative genius, if you're the creative genius, you don't really have an interest in explaining yourself to others.
Yeah, I often say that we need to not focus on the performance, but focus on the process, meaning most institutions that I've engaged with when they think about engaging their public official or community stakeholder, they bring them to the opening of their big fall concert. They bring them to the yearly black tie ball gala. What we're showing is perfection. We're showing something that has taken thousands of hours of honing a craft to perfect and put on a show. You don't see the lighting techs or the sewers or the stage engineers, or you don't see all of the manufacturing that happens behind the scenes. And you don't see the transformational process that happens day in and day out by individuals who are participating in that, whether they're a professional creative artist or you are bringing in schools and having them engage in workshops. Go ahead.
I think that there's a reason why that we do that, though.
Why?
I think we're trying to control the creative process, and we don't want them to really see it. And if you bring them in, they're going to ask questions about why you're sewing it that way. Why are you doing it this way? So interestingly, we are the creatives and we are the problem solvers, but we don't like it very much when people come in and question our ways, right? So as an architect, the biggest insult is when you're presenting an idea to a client and they dismiss it and suggest their own idea. And you've just spent 3 months coming up with this concept. And when I was a young architect, I used to be super offended by that. As a more mature architect, I think, what am I missing, right? What are they bringing to the table? What perspective is it that they're thinking about that's not informing the design? Because otherwise they would really be fond of what we're sharing with them. Or are we not communicating it in a way that design does include what they wanted to, what they want, right? And I think we don't want them. So like, I'm a big volunteer at the national level for the American Institute of Architects. And I often ask the staff at the national level to stop doing it so well. And they say, what are you talking about? I said, well, we're going to do a program that's trying to engage young architects, and we want to have a reception. Why are you just going off and doing the reception instead of coming up with a concept for this reception and then discussing it with us? Stop showing us the cake that's already made. Well, you don't want to worry about those things. Yeah, we do actually, because we need to be collaborating, because your perspective is singular. Our perspective is also singular, and there are other perspectives. We need to create a forum for all of that discussion to occur. That actually enriches the creative process, although it makes us as creatives very vulnerable because we're exposing the sausage. And people might say, why did you make that choice? Right? So I think that's a little bit of an issue.
So interesting, because I had a client one time that I suggested that they show the mess behind the art.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was told I was work. Now
Yep.
it's like, okay, yes, I am work.
So
it is work.
So way back in the day, I worked for an architect named Lucien Lagrange. He was a French guy. He had been a partner at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill in Chicago and went off on his own because he wanted to have his own design leadership. He was a classicist. And he had a presentation room in our office that was about 20 by 30. And all of the walls were homosoa painted white. And there was a big table in the center of the room. And at every presentation, we would bring every drawing we had ever done and put it up on the wall. And we, as young architects, we were like, Lucien, why do we need to do this? Like, that's an old idea. We've progressed past that. We now have a completely different elevation that we're showing, and the plan's very different. Why do we need to show this? And he says, we need to show them the journey we've been on. We need to show them the work we've done. They need to understand how far we've come. We understand how far we've come. They've forgotten. And they might actually say, oh, wait, back here, that was better. There was something back there that seemed to be better. That's a really interesting way to approach it. To have enough respect for the people who are paying you to do the work, to help them understand the journey you're on. And it wasn't overt. We didn't sit there and say, oh, look at all the work we've done. But it was very, very recognizable that we had done all of this work. And I can guarantee you on every project I worked with him on, we would go back and recoup some of the ideas from previous concepts. we would always pull things forward that we had left go. There was something that was missing. We felt like it didn't have the same kind of spark, and we'd go back and pick those things out. So I think that's let's just talk about that with the arts community. If we just expose ourselves and make ourselves vulnerable, we actually might build empathy for what we do. And that actually might drive funding.
Yeah, I agree. And it sounds a little spiritual, if you will. I was reading a reflection recently that talked about quit putting down who you once were, because
Yes.
who you were helped you be who you are today.
Yep.
And it's this very similar thing that you just described, which is we have to all go through that process. But I agree how you're describing it. Why do the arts have this elitism reputation? And that,
Yep.
as I was told by a legislative leader, the arts are for rich white old people. They don't need our help.
Yep.
And so
when I became an architect, I'm from this little working class family in Appalachia, Ohio. And I have a personality that's unique in architecture. I'm very outgoing and gregarious, and I have been known to swear, and I've been known to be very direct and say things that kind of ruffle the feathers. In fact, my first boss told me I was the only person who could insult the client and within 3 minutes explain it. And reason I have always been like that is I feel like we get more success as creatives if we're more honest, right? And I've never really felt like I needed to pretend to be something that I'm not. I would feel really uncomfortable in my first few years as a professional because, if you come from a working class family, you don't even know what a pinpoint Oxford shirt is. You do not know how to wear a suit. You don't understand how to eat at a restaurant. I'm not kidding. You don't learn these things. And so I would look at some of my peers and they were really, really working hard to be polished. And I would be just like, I don't know, what's this fork for? I wanted to be vulnerable. I wanted people to realize that I was not that. I was a unique person. And to this day, I'm still, the irony is I've always been kind of a uppity person anyway. So it wasn't hard for me to be a snob, but it's at least as truthful.
true that you are not a snob, but let's talk a little bit about the intersection of architecture and art and the role that plays in building vibrant communities. And then second part, so I want to hear your thoughts on that intersection and how we build vibrant communities and placemaking. And then what advice do you have to arts leaders in thinking about collaborating with architecture, urban planners, things like that to help that process?
Yeah, so this is like my life's pursuit, this question, both of them. I
I
feel
didn't
like
know that.
I really feel like where I've been is in the space of helping try to justify the impact of architecture on communities and also help people recognize the importance of our viewpoint at the table. And I think that we've been really proud to become implementers because we're fixated on the building. And when you're really interested in the building alone, you become a person who is an implementer. But actually, architects offer a really creative approach to strategic vision. So if you take a developer who's the person who's taking the money and establishing the idea for a building, and you take the architect who's perceived as the creative implementer, there's a handoff that occurs. And I've actually always been super offended by that. Like, why? No. We want to participate in this strategy. And we want you to inform the creative process by being collaborative through. And so I think that the intersection occurs at us recognizing the individual value that each person brings to the table. So, go back to Michelangelo and others doing St. Peter's. I can guarantee you there wasn't a committee that planned it out, conceived it in the Roman Catholic Church. And then there was another committee that was over here establishing planning. And then there was an implementation committee. These people worked for years together. You can just look at the renovation that just occurred in Paris of Notre Dame. I watched a special on CBS about it, and it was amazing, the collaborative process that occurred. The artists were working with the artisans at the same time as the architects, the structural engineers, the fabricators, the makers, the builders. All of them had to do it all at the same time. They were all informing each other. And it is clearly a stunning result in record time. And it's because of that collaboration. So I feel like the intersection occurs when we recognize the value in each of those areas. And so as an architect, we need to step forward and ask questions about the initial conceptual strategy. We need to understand the business plan. We need to understand why. Why are you doing this building, right? Then in the public realm, we will be asked to be involved with projects, on commissions. We will be asked to sit on the downtown planning strategy for business leaders because we will understand it not just from a standpoint of implementation, but we'll understand the entire cycle from including the money, including the process of making, understand why we need to go through a process of getting funding in the public realm approved in certain ways, explain to the government decision makers why the funding needs to be at the level that it is. But right now, we're being represented by people who are not us at that table.
Or don't understand the process.
Or don't understand the
Correct.
process. Like, I think actually my opinion about a lot of this is it's sort of a dilemma because specialty breeds a lack of creativity. So if you look at an artist or an architect or a musician as a specialist, and they know something, you're putting them in a box again. You're saying, this is what you know. I just had this conversation with a good friend of mine about painting. We paint together and she's really good at interiors, like painting interior scenes. And I'm like, why don't you just do that? She's like, I want to explore. I mean, my idea of art is exploring. So what you're talking about is something that's maybe has commercial appeal or is something we're known for. But I think it's we seek that because it's really hard for us to understand complexity. I mean, it's why we have language, right? There are letters, the letters go together to make words, the words go together to make sentences, and all of the complexity gets like simplified, and there's definition and meaning to words. So when we're thinking about the arts, we do the same thing. When I say Maya Lin, what do you think of?
Why are you putting me on the spot?
We think of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial,
That's why I knew that
right?
name. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes,
We
I
think of the
do.
Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Um, do we realize how limiting that is in terms of her as a creative to think about that? I saw a singer, a songwriter, and a singer, and they were singing like they were from the 70s. I can't remember who it was, and they were singing the same old song they used that everyone loved. And I'm thinking, could you imagine being on the 50th year of singing the same damn song every concert? Like, that's not what we should be valuing in that artist. We should value their viewpoint of how they're analyzing society and looking at problems and using music as a way to help us, I don't know, escape, understand, transform, whatever
But
it is they're seeking to do.
you don't think that subconsciously we do value that? That's why we go to that concert to hear the song for the 50th time, because it puts us in a state of escapism or
Yes.
nostalgia, etc.
Yes. So that's why those artists will do them and they continue to do them, but they often are introducing new music at the same time,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the go between. And so I think you need to create a body of work and understand why your work is in a certain, for me, I'm 80% of my work is adapting existing buildings. So yeah, I do ground up buildings, but most of the work I do is in response to some context. And what I'm trying to do is take the bones of a building that was meant for warehousing or some industrial process potentially, and translate that into something that can support housing or office work in the 21st century. So that's what I have as in terms of a gift, is the ability to look at existing buildings and figure out how they can be repurposed in a way that makes them relevant.
Did you
I
have a
Go ahead.
did hearing you reflect is making me wonder if you had an event in your life that happened that formed or reshaped your perspective on your purpose.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I can point to it.
Would you like to share it?
Yeah. The Great Recession of 2008 through 11. Yep. So I was flying high, Mr. Fancy Pants, young entrepreneur taking over a firm, younger than most people do. Um, by any measure, people would view it as a great success. And when the economic forces changed, the needs changed. And what I held, what I valued, wasn't important anymore. And I found myself completely out of sync. And I was holding on to way too much. I was trying to be everything to all because I was trying to live up to this idea of what I thought I was supposed to be. So when the economy tanked and we had to really consider what we are, I really decided I'm just going to go with my heart and actually be less desperate and more intentional about the work that I do. So, and just recognize that I cannot just keep doing things to pursue money. I needed to do things to pursue a wholeness, because everything I'd done before didn't work out, right? So when you have failure at the level that I did as a professional in a mid-career point, and you felt really confident about what you had done previously, you recognize how you can try to serve all the masters you can, but things change and you can lose your, I have a friend there, their firm was selected as the National Architecture Firm of the Year a few years ago. And he said to me over coffee recently, I feel like when that happened, we became sort of the belle of the ball, like everybody wants to dance with us, but I know that dance isn't going to last forever. So I'm really just focusing in on what really is important to me and my colleagues so that we can endure. And I think that those kinds of, for me, it was like, it wasn't a moment, it was a period. It was a period. And it had to do with when it hit me in terms of my maturity as a professional. And it forced me to rethink what I wanted to do and become much more purposeful. And interestingly, since then, the firm's been way more successful. Way more successful.
Which says a lot, because it goes back to what I hear is be transparent, authentic, vulnerable, collaborative, true to oneself.
Yep.
So
and kind of get over yourself a bit.
Yeah.
That's the biggest lesson.
Yeah. So we are at the time that, and this is perfect because I've been toying with this idea. So when I started this podcast, I wanted to conclude every conversation asking everybody the same question. Do you remember James Lipton, who had the Inside the Actors Studio? Did you ever see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he would ask the actors that came in the same 5 questions at the end of every, which was great. And so I was kind of going along those lines. So I started asking, what's your favorite color? And it's nice, really at the end of the day, I thought, oh, it'd be great. Like Crayola would want to sponsor that segment of the podcast of, or like Blick Art or whatever it is, right?
Totally. Yep.
He would ask at the end, when you die and should you enter the pearly gates, what's the one thing that you would like to hear? So Tim, you're my first that I'm asking, and I won't trust me, get that long-winded when I ask this
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
everybody
yeah.
else
You're
going
building this
forward.
for everyone else to know. Yeah.
Exactly. So, Tim, when you pass and should you enter the pearly gates, I'll come up with my own way of asking this question, by the way. I haven't quite got there yet,
Sure.
but you get
Yep.
it. What do
Yep.
you hope to hear?
He loved people. That's what I want. That's what I want to hear. Boy, you really showed a lot of love to people. You gave of yourself, and um, you used your uh, talents and your intentionality to actually help people, and that is an act of love.
And that's what we're all called to do, right?
To me, if you're super spiritual, is God working through you. So, yeah, that's it. I want people to say he loved people. Now, if you
Wonderful.
really know me, you kind of chuckle at that, but yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fitting. So thank you for joining me for this conversation. I really
Thanks for having
appreciate it.
this.
Yeah.
What's really great about this, Angela, is you've made me think today. Um, so I can go away enriched by this. And that's really great. You're lifting all of us up. You're giving all of us creatives a platform, and it's so valuable. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, that means the world to me.
Thank you.